this saint experiencing the call of Jesus, this saint hearing the words of Jesus, and how disappointed I was every single day that I never heard the call. Like I was waiting for Jody, anything, like just call me something, and I never heard anything. It's taken 60 years or more for me to try to figure out all that call's coming in all kind of ways.
Welcome to the Exposing Catholic Show, where we expose the lives, interactions, and stories of Catholics. Our guest today is Mr. Joseph Waler, everybody's favorite principal. And now you are what at the diocese?
That's a good question. Actually, I'm serving as an assistant superintendent. It's a temporary role just for this school year, helping them out. They had an opening, and so I was available because I retired on June 30th, and by July 27th, here I was. It's a very short retirement.
Mm-hmm. So I want to dive into your faith life. Mm-hmm. One thing that has stood out for me, you would give these speeches or talks at NDCL when I was a student and when I come back to film. And something that I noticed is that you would say, if it was like a really important talk, you would go to your local chapel, church, and pray really early in the morning or before the talk, and then you would come and share that information with us while giving the talk. So I just want to touch on like the importance of that and your discernment for those talks.
Sure. Well, when you're leading a Catholic school, you're always trying to be conscious of the fact that it shouldn't really be about you. I mean, it is it's you who's the leader, but it's not why the school exists. It exists to, I would hope, encourage people to meet and follow Jesus. So I'd always try to take that seriously, for myself, to figure out how I probably can't share what I don't have. And I lived a far distance from NDCL. It was nearly 40 miles one way. So that gave me a lot of time in the morning to think. And, teachers didn't always like that because I'd come up with all kind of ideas during those 40 miles. And then I'd say, well, we could try this, we could try that. They're like, why doesn't he buy a house closer? Then we would we have to deal with all this. But it would be good prayer time. And then, of course, the beauty part of working in a Catholic school is you had a chapel right there, right down the hallway. There was no excuse for not having a prayer life other than willfulness, And so I would spend time there and just try to ground myself. I would start every day with this notion that people will always say, so how's your day going? Having a good day? I say, well, it started with me and Jesus. Now let's see what happens, because now you're in it, and we're in it together, So yeah, this day started with me and Jesus. And then little by little, another person, well, it becomes the whole body of Christ, and so you really have to be attentive to that. And the older I've gotten, the more reflective I think I've become about that. I think it just goes with the territory about white hair, it just makes you more reflective because, well, you're just conscious of the passage of time and trying to make the most of all those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So that prayerful journey that you have and that you're on, have you always been somebody of prayer, somebody that has been faithful?
Yeah, you should have my mom on this podcast. She'll give you she'd be really exposing the truth here. She would tell you, and from my earliest years, I always had a fascination with religion. I don't know what accounts for that. And it predates going to school, and I was a public school kid. I mean, proud graduate of the Cleveland Public Schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. I didn't go to a Catholic school until college. But even before schooling, even as a toddler, I have religious memories, and I think about them a lot these days. And it's kind of strange that I'd be thinking about myself as a toddler or as a primary school kid. But I honestly believe that something in those early experiences set me on this path. Now, my mom jokes and she says, well, maybe if I'd sent you to Catholic school, you'd have gotten this religion thing out of your system by now. Well, maybe, but I didn't. I was always intrigued by religious things. And my great aunt was a sister, and so those were different days back then. These, when you were at NDCL, Dom, you knew sisters, and you still have some relationship with our sisters of Notre Dame. Well, it was different then. My aunt was out of town. She'd only can come into town maybe once a year for a short visit with her family, and she'd be in her whole habit, and we would go to my grandmother's house to see her. I always look forward to that. I was like just amazed by it. I just sit there, and it's like, wow. And as I got older and would talk to her, it even became more fascinating. I could remember one time she was being transferred, and that was a pretty common thing for sisters every few years to be transferred from one school to another, in her case from one city to another. And I was just with her by myself. I don't know why would I have been in my grandmother's house with my aunt the nun by myself. I don't know, but I was. And I remember saying to her, Sister Sylvia, her name was Sister Sylvia, I said, what if you got transferred and you didn't want to go? Like, you really liked teaching third grade in Detroit and they transfer you to Pittsburgh or something. And what if you didn't want to go? And when I was a little kid, they called me Jody. I mean, to this day, my mom still will call me Jody as my nickname. And I can remember my aunt looking at me and saying, Jody, you would never tell the sister who's the provincial of the community no. You would never tell her no. Why do I remember that? I think because I was simultaneously horrified and fascinated by that response. Horrified that you can't say no, you have to go. But then fascinated by, wow, she really believes this stuff. She believes that this is somehow reflecting God's will to follow what your superior is telling you to do, and maybe it doesn't make sense to you, but it serves a bigger purpose. Now, was I 10 or 12 when I heard that? I don't know. But here I am knocking on the door to Medicare at 65 in a couple months, and I still remember it. So something about that, there was something about my makeup, the way God made me, that made me attuned to those kinds of things. And hey, here I am, in the diocesan offices with you two today, still continuing that. I've been in Catholic education now 44 years. I started as an infant, well, not quite, but 21 years old when I started teaching. And here I am going to be 65, and it's the same fascination over the years.
Yeah, it never gets old.
No, it doesn't, and working down here, this is like so cool. You have the cathedral right across the street. There's no excuse not to celebrate the Eucharist. There's no excuse not to celebrate the Sacrament of Reconciliation. In fact, you'd have to deliberately try not to. It's all around you, but when I retired, one of the things I said to my wife, all I want to do is have the opportunity to, celebrate daily Mass, to have the freedom to do that. I didn't know exactly how that would play out. I'd go to my local parish, whatever. Well, here, look how it played out. They call me. I get this job down here, at least for this year, and I have access to all the riches of our sacramental tradition, right? Within a 2-minute walk. That's good for me.
Absolutely. And the even daily Mass that they celebrate at the cathedral is beautiful.
It is,
they play the organ, and whoever's singing down there, it's just super awesome
12 noon
experience.
Mass is that way. They also have Mass at 7:15, which sometimes I make it for. That's a little more, well, I would call it the Mass of the unconscious, but we're all a little more subdued at 7:15 a.m. The priests who preside do a great job, but it's quiet. There's no singing. It's a different kind of prayer experience, but it's crack of dawn really.
Yeah, so growing up with the nun in your life and with just a religious background, what were some of those standout experiences?
I credit my parents who were definitely, practicing Catholics. I don't remember my mom and dad being particularly devout the way maybe some people would define that. I think they were, what would be, expected at that time. I grew up in the 60s so as a young boy, certain things do still stick in my brain, like earliest memories that you would have. Before I was 5 years old, two things stick out, and you do wonder about this. Now, you two are young. One day, God willing, you'll have children. Take this as a lesson. You have no idea how that child is picking up the different things that you do that you might not even be thinking of. But the child is absorbing that, or at least a crazy child like this one was absorbing it all and taking it all in. So I vividly remember, not a religious memory, but I vividly remember the time when President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. So I would have been 4, and I could remember asking my parents, when will the cartoons come back on TV? Because at that time you had, 3 TV stations? And of course it would have been wall-to-wall coverage of the president's assassination and funeral. And I could have been wondering, when are my cartoons going to come back? Well, that's a pretty basic childhood kind of thing. But religiously, I remember other things. And my mom remembers things that I don't, but she'll tell the story. Like, for example, I'm a Joseph. My father's Joseph, my grandfather Joseph, so I'm the third one that I know of. I don't know, maybe my great-grandfather was Joseph. I don't know his name, but it was St. Joseph's Day, March 19th, and I think my brother, who is 16 months younger than I am, said, well, we should probably go to church. It's St. Joseph's birthday, feast day, And my mother says that I turned to him and said, that's not going to work. He's obviously going to be in heaven celebrating that birthday with Jesus. So, really, what kind of a crazy kid was I that was thinking that way? But I had those thoughts. A vivid memory I have that really, I think, the more I thought about it, was powerful. In my background, we're a Polish family, so there were lots of religious traditions that revolved around the nationality. And at Easter time, Eastern Europeans would have a tradition of taking food on Holy Saturday to the church to be blessed. So you put a basket full of, kielbasa and eggs and a lamb made out of butter and small loaves of bread and other kinds of things that you would have for your, Easter meal, and you would take it to church on Holy Saturday to be blessed. And then, of course, because it was blessed, well, that food was special. And you couldn't just throw the garbage out, like the eggshells or the crumbs of the bread or whatever. It was blessed. You wouldn't throw it in the trash. So I could remember, I couldn't have been 5 yet. I could remember watching my father burning these scraps of food because, well, it was blessed food and it needed to be incinerated. It had to be treated in a special way. And did I understand that at the time? Clearly not, but I knew it was something different. And then going into this religious fascination that I had. But now, as a grown-up, here's how I took that. Wow, I belong to a religion that believes even garbage could be sacred. That must be a pretty good thing then for me. That even trash had to be treated with dignity because it was blessed. So how should I treat you? And how should I treat you? And how should I treat myself if eggshells needed to be treated so tenderly? And my dad doing this would have been 25 years old, 26, young. And there he was, doing what he saw as his religious duty. Now, with the passage of time, we would take the food to my grandparents' house, who had an incinerator, and they just take care of it in a more modern way. But prior to that, that's what he did. And I'm struck by my parents doing that. I'm struck that I remember it, but I'm more struck by the the underlying meaning there. And I think that's what we miss with young people, with kids today. Now, my wife and I were never blessed with children of my own, so that makes me a child rearing expert, right? Because I don't know anything about that, But I think we miss out by not providing young people with kids, young ones, with religious experiences that you don't know how they're going to interpret it, how they're going to take it. There's no way my 25 or 26-year-old father, who's now in heaven, would have thought that his 64-year-old son would be remembering that. Not a chance.
Yeah.
But there's something else going on there, huh? There was something about the Spirit moving in all of those people, my mom, my dad, me, and sacred garbage. If I had more energy, I'd write a book about that, huh? That takes a whole new meaning to our environmental and consciousness about the environment and all the rest. Well, at its root, there it is. It's all sacred. All of it. Even the stuff you are done with, you want to throw away, that's quote unquote waste. Our religion would say, no, it's all holy. So that kind of stuff just, intrigues me, as you could tell, I think.
We've got something special for all our Catholic organizations. Now, before you skip past this part, it's not an ad. It's more like an incredible opportunity to take your digital presence to the next level. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret here, something only for our podcast listeners. We, DM Productions, have a 2-day Catholic social media makeover course. It's an online course specifically made for Catholic organizations. It will take your social media to the next level. And we make it easier than ever with our step-by-step video walkthroughs, cheat sheets, customizable templates, and more. Catholic organizations, let's start creating the quality and results that secular businesses have, but with the depth and beauty of Catholicism. Oh, and did I mention the price? $700. But remember I said I was going to let you in on a little secret? Use code DMPodcast to get it completely free. No credit card required. Just pop that code in and you're all set. Head over to www.dm.productions/social media makeover or click the link in the description. Now back to the show. I think one of the biggest things that have happened recently for me is becoming a lector and then seeing the Mass in such a different light, being able to like I'm reading the passages beforehand, and then even in the book, the Lector book, they have these little descriptions on how it all ties in and like how the gospel plays with that, and then the timing of it in Mass too. It's just like you have a greater appreciation for what's actually going on during Mass and the flow of everything.
Yeah.
And then same with Eucharistic minister is we're getting trained to do the sick and homebound, and there's just this, once we got the Eucharistic minister training, is like there's a calling to do more, so to stop receiving it on the hand, to then start receiving on the tongue, and a greater reverence towards the host and the Eucharist, which then obviously led us to the sick and homebound. And like, if we can't live without it, and we have so much energy and we're young and we can go to church, what about those people that can't?
Yeah.
Got to rub in that you got so much energy and you're young. Okay, thanks, Tom. I used to like you a lot. Cassie, you're still okay. No, but isn't it true about all things? I mean, I'm an educator, and so I know just from experience that students learn better when they're actively involved with whatever they're doing. If they're passive participants, they're just watching something. Who wants to watch a science lab? You want to do it. Who wants? There's something about being a spectator at an athletic event, which is exciting. But I don't know how exciting that is if you're actually an athlete, because you want to get on that court, you want to get on that field. There's something about deploying your gifts and talents, more fully. And when you take an active role in any of those liturgical ministries, well, for sure, and it kind of like it's a little bit like peering behind the curtain in the Wizard of Oz, like, you can see, okay, there's a lot of, technicality things that have to happen there, to make that mass a successful experience. I mean, this technology would be part of it. You got to make sure they get a microphone and all the rest. But when you're actively trying to proclaim the word of God, or you're actively sharing the body of Christ, again, you get that constant refrain. It's not about you. God's using you to accomplish those things for sure, because that host is not going to fly out of that ciborium into that sick person's house. You got to take that, and those words are not going to, just miraculously be read out of that lectionary. You got to do that, but you got to do that with a certain reverence that you're an instrument of something, the priests at my home parish, St. Stanislaus in Cleveland, were always Franciscans. So that prayer of St. Francis, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Make me a channel of your peace. Pray about that one. Think about that and recognize you may be the pipe, but the water flowing through is coming from some other source, and we live in a world where it's pretty easy to confuse that. In fact, you're using all this technology for a good purpose. But let's face it, everything that we have in front of us, the microphone, the camera, the screen, all the rest, can be used for self-aggrandizement, right? It often is. Well, 99.9% of social media is that, huh? What about me? Look at me. It's all about me. Today's gospel reading, the mother of James and John saying to Jesus, I want you to have one of these sons on your left and one on the right, put them in the place of honor, put them in the place of privilege. They're my boys, Jesus had other ideas, that it's not really about them, there's something bigger that we're doing here. But that's a lesson we have to constantly learn, because, you can be a lector and start to turn yourself into like a public speaking all-star. It's tempting. You can make it about you. That's where the perspective shaped by prayer helps you.
Definitely. Yeah, you can start with really good intentions and then veer off the wrong path for sure.
Yeah. Christianity's loaded with examples of that. Loaded with examples where the initial inspiration was good, and then it got warped. Well, what do we pray in the prayer of St. Michael, about those evil spirits who are prowling about the world seeking the ruin of souls? One way souls get ruined is pride. Big way, and so that you gotta work on that. And it, I'm sure in the work you're doing, in this ministry you're doing, people compliment you. I'm sure people say, this is great. I'm glad you're doing this. It's so wonderful to see a young married couple so involved in the church. Well, that could take hold. Like, oh, look at us. Yeah, we're just like the little model Catholic couple. How about? Well, in some ways, yes. In other ways, you get, I'm just doing my small part.
Yeah.
Just doing my small part.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to continually remind yourself of that for sure. Yeah. Stay humble and kind.
Yeah, for sure.
Can we talk about the book?
Oh yeah, this is another childhood thing. Now remember, I grew up in a world where there was no Xbox, there were no computers, there wasn't even like an electric typewriter when I grew up. Okay, this is like the Stone Age, so don't laugh too much. Okay, and so your window to another world was really books. And that's true for people today, too. They can access books in different ways. But I could remember finding in my parents' house, this is not the actual book, but it's the same book, but not the exact same one that was in my parents' house. This book called Heroes of God. And to tell you how obsessed I am with the impact of my childhood on who I am today, I remember looking at this book. It's a book about the lives of the saints, really. It was published in the 40s, and each page is just a different saint, and a short little paragraph. And I could remember lived in a 2-story house in the Polish neighborhood, the Fleet Avenue area, Cleveland. Small little house. My 3 brothers, my mom and dad, a dog, and I think it was a little over 1,000 square feet. It was humble, a humble beginning. And I can remember being on the second floor there, finding this book, I don't know, in a box of things, and just, again, with that religious fascination, just reading these stories. And what runs through all these stories, there's all this stuff about, this saint experiencing the call of Jesus, this saint hearing the words of Jesus, and how disappointed I was every single day that I never heard the call. Like I was waiting for Jody, anything, like just call me something, and I never heard anything. Well, this is a letdown, and these people, these are stories about young people, old people, and they're hearing this call of Jesus, and they're turning their lives around, and they're founding religious communities, and they're going out as missionaries to different places, or St. Patrick driving out snakes from Ireland, or whatever the stories are.
Yeah.
A lot of this is a stuff of legend, and I never heard that call, and it took, it's taken 60 years or more for me to try to figure out, that call's coming in all kind of ways. If I'm waiting to hear audible words, I'm probably going to wait a long time, and then I'll be in the lunatic asylum hearing voices, my wife might be ready to put me in a lunatic asylum on any given day, I think. And that's, you guys are married 7 months. I'm married 39 years, so she has the reason to put me in a lunatic asylum, I think, or she's the one who should have a picture in here in the lives of the saints. But I learned with passage of time, I guess, that the Lord's reaching out to each one of us, but that call, we take it literally. When I was a little boy, again, another little boy story, nobody went up near the altar. That was a different kind of a church. There was communion rail. You didn't go anywhere near that altar. The only time I knew anybody that was up there on the altar was when my uncle and aunt got married. And what I thought as a little boy with a literal mind, when they're singing, about the bread of life and everything, I thought when you got married, they opened up that tabernacle, and in there was a little Jesus, a little Joseph, a little Mary, and you got a chance to feed them. Like, I thought there were little people in there. Because you would walk, as a little kid, you'd go to church, and your mom would point to that tabernacle and say, Jesus is in there. Well, your mind can't handle that. You're a very concrete thinker when you're a toddler. So what was I to think? Well, Jesus is in there. And the only person that got to go up there that I knew was my uncle, and he probably got to peek in there and see maybe there's a little donkey and little carpentry shop. And I thought that's what I thought, But that story, it sounds like and you're both appropriately laughing and thinking I've totally lost my mind. But figure it out. It's just another step in the constant evolution of what it means to be a religious person. At different points in your life, it manifests itself in different ways. So the way you two are thinking about being a religious person is going to naturally be different than the way I think about it today. I do have a few years on you. Neither one of those ways is better or worse. They're just all developmentally appropriate. And so when you have children one day, God willing, you'll see, I think we do kids a disservice by giving them too many answers. Let's let them have some questions. Let's let them think there's a little Jesus in that tabernacle, and then we can help them understand what is in there. Well, let's not just fill their little heads with stuff that they can't handle anyway. I'm waiting for a call. Well, you had to take a lot of life experience to realize how that call came. So I ended up my whole life in Catholic schools. I'm kind of thinking that was the call. Now, God willing, I get to heaven, I hope it's going to be confirmed. or the Lord says, oh, you kind of missed the call. It was supposed to do something else, but you did all right with that, but really, look, here's what you could what have been. Here's what I really wanted you to do. Well, maybe, and you do think about that. I don't think that's really doubt in a bad sense, but you do wonder, well, how would my life have been different if? What if I had done this? What if I had done that? You have to have trust that call, that trying to answer the call is good enough. You don't have to understand it. I'm a big believer understanding's overrated. Really, we try to understand too much. We should use our intellect, but then we need to step back and say, hey, I can't grasp all this. I got to just do the best I can. And this seems to be what I'm called to do. When he proposed marriage to you, I hope you didn't pull out a list of pros and cons and, and analyze it all. 2 points for every pro, -2 for every con. And then, in the end, you came up, just a slight better on the pro. Okay, well, so we'll go with him. Well, it had to be deeper than that, And I think that's true about all of life. So the original book could still be in my mom's possession, in the stuff in her home. I don't know that, but eBay, I found a copy. This is where this one came from. I put a bid on it on eBay, and it is exactly the same book, exactly what I remember in the 1960s reading. And or for all I know, my mom sold it to somebody, and I bought it back. But nevertheless, it's we talk about relics in our Catholic Church. This is a relic for me. This is a sacred thing that was part of my formation. That what about these people that really, really wanted to follow the Lord in all different places, all different countries. We got men, we got women, we got older ones, young ones, smart ones, dumb ones. And they all just somehow wanted to respond. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess probably the best that we can all do. Just try to respond. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite saint from that book?
From this book, I would say, I think because of my upbringing in a Franciscan parish, I think St. Francis would definitely be the saint that I gravitate toward. And I've read a lot about him. I don't understand 1/zillionth of what his life was all about. There are people that get doctorates in this kind of stuff. So I'm an amateur when it comes to that. But there was just, if there's a message I pick up from St. Francis, it does relate to that, sacred trash story that, St. Francis telling us, look, all of creation, everything is a way to connect with God, So people put St. Francis there in bird feeders, and in their garden, the statues. We see this all over the place, and you think, well, okay, what's that trying to get across to us? That all of this thing, all of God's creation, properly seen, should be unified together, all pointing in one direction, And I do actually kind of like the bird feeder, St. Francis, because people say, oh, look, it's just a little statue. It's kind of like, trivializing. I thought, well, have you ever watched a bird feeder? A bird feeder is a pretty rough place. The birds fight each other for the food. The birds mess up that bird feeder. There's bird crap everywhere, and you don't have to edit that out of this, but, the bird feeder is real life. And you put St. Francis right there in the middle, I think that's probably a pretty good spot. We need to, as Christians, be in the nitty-gritty of life, not some rarefied existence, where we're just, all polished and refined. Mm-hmm. No, what does Pope Francis tell the bishops? He wants them to have the smell of the sheep. Yeah. Imagine. I want you to stink. He means it in the most positive way. I don't need you to be perfumed. I don't need you to be, set apart. I need you to be, well, in another way of saying, in the middle of that bird feeder, in the struggle. I need you to be there in the mess. Because let's face it, life's messy. I mean, I don't know. I know a little bit about his story. I can tell you things about him, actually. Since I've known him since 14. But isn't everybody's story a bit of a mess? When you think about it, every family's a bit of a mess. Sometimes a lot of a mess. Your own career story, whatever. I mean, I don't know too many people that aren't kind of like messed up at some level. I used to find that when I was a school principal. Maybe it's because you have an office with a door on it, but I don't care who it was. If it could be a freshman, it could be a senior, it could be a girl, it could be a boy, it could be a teacher. Close the office door, have them sit down in the chair there, and just look at them and say, "Honey, what's going on?" They all cry. All of them. All of them. That's all it takes. Honey, what's going on? Well, what does that tell you? Look how fragile we all are. Oh, we put on a good front. We act like we got it together. We don't. We're desperately listening for the call, huh? We're desperately listening for those words of salvation. It's hard. So St. Francis and the bird feeder. Yeah. So in my backyard, it's like a St. Francis museum. I got lots of different things. One nice one. He's there with a deer and a little sheep, and I got another statue that's by the walkway. And the one personal thing I have in my office here at the diocese is a white marble statue of St. Francis that I keep there right on my desk. During the dark days of COVID, when I was a high school principal, it was horrible. I mean, talk about a mess. I was desperately listening for a call. The call say, "Get me out of this place," because to be a school principal during COVID was like a horrible experience. Just horrible. I mean, everybody. I mean, you remember those days? Everybody was anxious, upset, angry. And schools became kind of the lightning rod for that. Because, we were quarantining kids and telling you can't run cross country, or telling you can't play basketball because the kid next to you has COVID and you've been exposed. It was a terrible experience. And I could remember at one point just having the insight, wow, I got to take that statue of St. Francis off the shelf in my office, and I put it right on the table right in front of me. Because, in his day, in the Middle Ages, life was going to hell too. Everything was falling apart. The call that he heard, Francis, rebuild my church, for it has fallen into ruin. And maybe I like him because he took it literally at first. Started rebuilding that little chapel with bricks and mortar. Well, that wasn't what God meant, but he understood it in the way he could understand it. And it took time to realize, oh, no, it's not what you're asking. You're not asking me to build you a structure. You're asking me to build a relationship with people, with God, with creation. Well, so I think that that got me through those dark days of COVID. Just looking at that statue, thinking, hey, it's not only 2020, and it's getting close to the anniversary of when we closed schools, like March 13th, 2020. So 4 years ago. I think I had darker hair then, Dom. And I lost a bunch of hair, I think, during that experience. It was like rough. But looking at that statue of St. Francis, it could just remind me that, hey, every era has got its challenges. Every era has got its mess. But what's constant through all that? The call. Whether you're living in the 1200s or you're living in 2024. Or you were living in the year 24, the call. That is the constant. The rest of it comes and goes. We just, we think we're the ones who are victimized by the worst possible circumstance. You listen to some people, you think that they're going through hell on earth. Oh, things are terrible. Oh, the country's falling apart. Oh, well, maybe all that's true. I don't know. But it's not unusual. I mean, pick up the Bible. Look at it. There's lots of things that came and went, rose and fell. That's the human story. I think we're just living our own chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I know you have inspired and really touched the lives of so many people, because when you retired from NDCL, there was a huge event. Everybody was losing their minds, and it was like a heartfelt moment, but also like a very like, oh, that one hurts type of thing. So I just appreciate you coming on and talking about these different stories and talking about the call. Is there any last things that you want to say?
Oh, I think that one thing I said to the students and the staff at Notre Dame Cathedral Latin on that celebration day right before my retirement is I recalled for them how, as a 19-year-old, I found a prayer from St. John Henry Newman that it was in a little slip of paper. The things I remember, just like, why do I remember these things? And I think, what are the things I'm forgetting? That I should have remembered. Like my wife says, I can't remember to bring my lunch to work every day, but I could remember when I'm 19 or when I'm 5. So that tells you something right there. But it was a little slip of paper, and nothing fancy, not like today where we have all kind of, fancy prayer cards and all the rest. It's just like a little typewritten piece of paper. But the prayer said, God has created me to do him some definite service. He has committed some work to me that he has not committed to another. I am my mission. And I love the line that he says, I may never know what that mission is in this life, but I will be told it in the next. And the thing is to be a link in a chain, a bond of connection between people. I do think that's probably going to be that eye-opening experience. If I'm blessed enough to experience heaven, it's probably going to be, definitely it's going to be more eye-opening and world-shattering than me thinking there was a little Jesus and Mary in a tabernacle in my parish church. I mean, that's what I really thought. Now, the things I think today, what is God going to do to explode that open in the afterlife? And when I'm told what my mission really was, odds are I'm going to be surprised that maybe my mission was to help this person or that person. Maybe I don't even remember it, but maybe that was the reason why I existed, was for that one encounter. Because in the course of retirement, people would tell me all kinds of things about myself. To be honest with the two of you, some of the things they would tell me I didn't remember. So it wasn't you, Cassidy, because you weren't one of my students. But, for you to say to me, I'll never forget what you said to me when I was 15 and I was crying, I don't remember it. But it was that special day for you. Just like I shared in this podcast today, this conversation with the two of you, things that happened in my life that I'm sure my parents didn't plan out.
Yeah.
I'm sure my aunt the nun didn't think that registered at all with me when she said, you would never tell the provincial no. I'm sure when she died, I'm sure she didn't remember that conversation even happened. But here I am talking about it. So I think that is going to be, that is what you trust in. That when we say we're people of faith, we trust that God's holding all that together, and we don't have to understand it, and we don't have to worry about it. We just got to be faithful. So that's what I would leave you with. Be faithful. But I think the two of you are trying to do that. So that warms my heart to see two young ones doing this work. People worry about the world. I'm looking at the world. I think it's going to be okay. Thanks.
Thank you.